We originally had 4 speeches scheduled, but you wanted to have a conversation, and you have worked very hard to, in the past, have focus on regional issues. And if you could start out by talking about that, Governor, I'd appreciate it.
Well, first of all, let me thank all of you for your attendance here in North Carolina. Welcome to North Carolina. You're in the most beautiful state in the United States of America, with all due respect. I also want to thank my team here. Tony Tata, I actually interviewed him for the head of public safety in North Carolina because of his military background. But after interviewing him, I realized that if he can build roads under fire in Iraq and Afghanistan, surely he can build roads right here in North Carolina. So I'm very, very fortunate to have John and Sharon and Tony a part of our team. And there are really 2 things that I learned as a mayor for 14 years that I'm learning as governor in my first 9 months, and that is, first, you have to have a good team, and you have to work together as a team and not in silos. And that's one reason I didn't want 4 individual speeches given to you today by these 4 people, which was the original schedule. I wanted you to see that we are not 4 silos. We are working together as a team because transportation integrates with the environment, integrates with economic development, and integrates with one of my many goals as governor. And so one of the things we demand is that we work together as a team, and we meet once a week. Rain or shine, we meet once a week to talk about where are we integrated, where are we working as partners, and where can we improve that partnership. The second thing I realized as a mayor is that you have to have a vision and you have to have a plan. And often that plan goes way beyond political boundaries. And when I was mayor of Charlotte from 1995 till 2009, I realized that South Carolina border is right next door, and there's no way that I cannot plan without South Carolina being involved, or even without the counties within North Carolina beyond my political boundaries involved. So when we first developed a 25-year transportation plan in 1995, it was not a Charlotte city plan. The city of Charlotte was around 180 square miles. It was a regional plan that went across political boundaries. And it also was an economic development plan, a housing plan, an education plan that was integrated together. And now as governor, and I realize this as mayor also, that we have to have a regional plan for our state. We have to have a statewide plan, and one of Tony's first directive that he got from me was to develop a 25-year transportation infrastructure plan which we can show the public and we can sell to the public, and they know exactly what we're doing. And he's in the midst of developing that plan along with our Department of Transportation Board. But that plan has to also integrate with Sharon Decker and with John Skvarla. If they're not working together, it won't be a successful plan. But one thing that we have to do as a group, and one reason I wanted to come here, is because we're connected not just with South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. We're actually connected with Georgia and Mississippi and Alabama and Florida and all the way to the up coast, because in North Carolina we have the intersections of I-26, I-40, I-77, and I-95. And every one of those roads, or at least one of those roads, has an impact on every state in this room right now. So we have to be working together on what is our integration of transportation, from roads to rail, and I also include water, energy, and communications in that 25-year regional transportation plan. As mayor, I learned in Salisbury we have a thing called the Yadkin River Bridge, and every day there would be a major wreck on the Yadkin River Bridge, and it literally stopped commerce from Washington, D.C. down to Atlanta, all the way down to Birmingham into Florida. If there was a wreck on the Yadkin River Bridge, it stopped commerce everywhere. So one thing I did as mayor was call Shirley Franklin, the mayor of Atlanta at the time, and say, can you help me appeal to the federal government to get us funds to widen and rebuild the Yadkin River Bridge, which was literally a 4-lane road, very, very dangerous. And Shirley Franklin, the mayor of Atlanta, one of our big competitors, said absolutely, because it impacted her in Atlanta as much as it impacted me in Charlotte, North Carolina. And that's the type of regional thinking and teamwork we need to have, and we also need to think that way among these silos in state government. So that's my thinking, Tony, and you're doing a great job in implementing that type of vision and teamwork.
Thanks, Governor. You know, one of your directives to me, very first directives, was not only to develop a 25-year infrastructure plan, but to change the way that funding is distributed so that it was apolitical and needs-based. And working with Sharon and John, we changed that. It hadn't been changed in 24 years, and we got it through the legislature. You signed it into law. And our thought process is to be more efficient, which this law now allows us to do with the transportation money, and then develop the plan, and then take the plan to the people. And Sharon, why don't you talk a little bit about how your department and my department are working together with the economic opportunity zones, and where we're looking to build infrastructure to create opportunities and connect people.
Sure. As we look at what the governor calls the Carolina comeback, one of the things I know is that logistics will be the discerning differentiator for North Carolina. Coming out of business, I know that in today's economy, the thing that is making companies move from good to great in a lot of instances is logistics. How do they move people? How do they move products? How do they move processes? And the same is true for North Carolina's economy. So Tony and John and I are partners in this process. So as we develop our 10-year economic development plan for North Carolina, logistics is a big piece of that. How will we move products? How will we move people through and into and out of this state? And we take a partnership approach to this. So folks in the commerce team are meeting on a weekly basis with Tony and members of his team around specific projects, around our vision for the future of North Carolina. As we look at where we have the greatest opportunities economically in North Carolina, where unemployment has been stubbornly the highest, we know that part of the answer to coming out of this is logistics. It's transportation. It's access to ports. It's access to larger urban centers in our state. And so one of the things we are deeply involved in is planning with Tony's team to determine where do we prioritize from an economic development standpoint: roads, trains, planes, movements of people and product, so that we can rebuild economies in North Carolina. And it takes some long-term thinking. I think we look for short-term fixes, and perhaps there are some of those that we can access and implement. But the reality is much of the changing of the economy that we must do today has to take a long-term vision. So we are delighted to be a part of this 25-year plan, and delighted to be a part of the kind of tactical planning also that has to happen. I can tell you guys that it is a major impression to companies looking at North Carolina to do business when they're sitting in the governor's office with the Secretary of Transportation, the Secretary of Environmental and Natural Resources, and the Secretary of Commerce and the governor. When a company sees that kind of cooperative work and collaborative thinking, one, they don't believe it. Secondly, they want to believe it. And as they work with us through project planning and possibility, they do believe it. And so it makes me very proud to sit at the table with these teammates and to know that it's not just how things look, but as our motto says, we intend to be rather than to seem, and this is really a team, and it's great to be a part of it.
Thanks, Sharon. And you know, John, I know when you took the reins there at the Environment and Natural Resources, you found several processes that you have ultimately fixed very rapidly that were slowing down some of the things that Sharon just talked about with regard to permitting and getting the logistics moving in the right direction. Would you like to talk about that for a minute?
Sure, Tony. When the governor called and asked me to become the Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources, he said, I have two conditions. One is you must protect the environment. Two, you must give us a hand in getting this economy going. Well, automatically, the assumption is that if you're going to get the economy moving, you must relax standards. And I never understood that. We, as the regulator, know the standards and the rules better than anybody. And if you're going to grow the economy and protect the environment, our job is not to be an adversary with those folks who are trying to do things in our state. So we basically have changed the philosophy at DENR. Our job as the regulator and the one that knows the environmental rules better than anyone is to help you from the very beginning, whether it's a permit for a DOT project or a permit for a commerce project. Our job is to take you by the hand and help you through that maze without necessarily compromising or reducing or lowering our standards. And so it's been a difference of philosophy. And it's been a difference of philosophy that has already started to have positive effect, I think, not only on the DOT side, but certainly on the commerce side. And I'll give you just a quick, easy example of something that Tony and the Governor and Sharon mentioned about the new transportation plan. We have the largest zoo in the world in North Carolina, 1 million visitors a year. And for many years now, a major highway expansion has been planned near the zoo. And we got to Raleigh and realized, guess what? All these years of planning, there has not been an exit planned for the zoo. Well, how long did it take, Tony? It took us about 30 days.
Right.
We now have an exit for our zoo, which is the largest zoo in America and maybe a source of economic development.
Absolutely.
I'll clarify, it's an exit planned
Yeah.
to be built for the zoo.
An exit plan. Yeah. Hey, for what we've had for all these years, that's
We're
pretty
moving
good.
fast, John,
That's a
but
great
not
step
quite
forward.
that fast.
Mark that down, hey, John, that is just a plan.
That plan.
still.
Yeah.
But that's a great example. I think we've all three been pretty surprised at how many opportunities we found that all it took was a phone call. All it took was a conversation or a question or a challenge to try to figure out the solution to some issues that have just been stuck. And there just hadn't been an open dialogue and I think a desire to really get some things to completion and make some things happen. But we're very motivated by growing this economy again. And I guess the key to it is we share a common vision for that. And the question becomes, what do each of us have to do to make that vision a reality? And it will take all of us to do it.
Well, you know, Governor, Sharon and I share a liaison, and that we
Yes.
split the cost on. I'm looking to transfer that cost to Sharon's department. But
Watch it.
The liaison will meet with me, meet with Sharon, and very early on in January, I said, what are some real quick things we could do? And there were two things at the ports that we have actually, in February, less than 30 days of your governorship, we passed a multi-million-dollar deal at the ports for refrigeration. There is no refrigeration at the two North Carolina ports, and North Carolina is the second largest poultry and pork producer in the country, and yet every ounce of that has to go, sorry guys, to Virginia or South Carolina. Well, we're building a refrigeration facility now that is going to take that business and put it through our Wilmington port, and we got that done in less than 30 days of your governorship through the Council of State. They've already begun to dig the footings at the port, and it'll be operational by May, June of next year. Likewise, wood pellet industry, we passed a major multi-million-dollar deal for our ports. It'll net about $3 million in revenue every year for the next 10 years with Enviva Wood Fuels, and it's that kind of thing. Sharon and I are talking all the time about this, and of course, John's involved in the discussion because there's environmental concerns about the timber industry. So lots of effort going on in that regard.
In fact, one of the lessons we've learned, and I saw this as a mayor for 14 years, is often the blockage is not the rules or the policy, it's the bureaucracy between the customer and the top. And often what happens, and you all know this, there's peer pressure on when the customer is complaining about the bureaucracy, they don't know what to do, because if they call the top, they're in fear that the middle will find out that you made the call, and there's fear of retaliation. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Well, that means we have the wrong culture. If there's a fear of retaliation for a customer concerned about a permit being stopped, not due to the rules, but just due to the bureaucracy not moving on it, that means we have a problem with the culture. And what we're attempting to do, and this was a cultural issue in DENR, was get some customer service and treat you as customers and not adversaries, and not have retaliation against those who actually go, well, wait a minute. We have a better idea on how to shore up this mound or this dam or whatever might be blocking a road from being built. how about this idea? And we'll actually get them in a room and talk about that idea, as opposed to just pretending that we open up a book and we go, does it meet the exact specifications of that rule, or are we just interpreting it that way? So we hire people to get them to think and be problem solvers, but you have to have a culture to do that. It doesn't happen overnight. I realized it happened at times when I was mayor. When people would call me up as mayor, they'd go, I got to tell you what's really happening, but please don't tell anybody. That means we got a problem.
But you know, the best example of that, I think, is John Skvarla rolling up his sleeves. He called me one day and says, hey, you mind if I talk to Terry Gibson about some issues we've gotten? John, would you like to talk about that? I mean, because you and Terry have worked very closely on some things, and you just rolled up your sleeves and began breaking down some barriers that were pre-existing.
And it really was just that. You know, one of the things that we do is obviously environmental mitigation. You've all experienced mitigation issues. And there has always been tension in North Carolina between the DOT and DENR about whose dog is prettier, candidly. And I called Tony and said, let me take a shot at seeing if we can't see how everybody's dog wins the loving cup or the prize. And you get everybody in a room and you realize what the objective is, and you find out where there is common ground and how it can be smoothed out, and lo and behold, we do have that. It's not a problem now. And that got solved in probably the first 90 days.
Yeah. But therein lies the big difference in what's beginning to happen, because it's not about DENR winning, DOT winning, commerce winning, which is clearly the world we walked into, but it's about the state of North Carolina winning and jobs for North Carolinians. That's what we're focused on, is growing this economy again. And the governor set such a great stage for us to say, we're going to work at this as a team, and that's my expectation. I won't accept anything less. And then to find great partners in the process has been a really powerful thing. It's been interesting to talk to my teammates in commerce who will still sometimes say, well, DENR won't do that. DOT won't do that. Well, let's have a conversation about it. Let's talk about what it is we're trying to make happen, and whether it's the creation of jobs in a rural community in North Carolina. Some of the places we have the greatest challenge, as is true in all of your states, is in the rural part of our states. And oftentimes there are significant environmental issues, there are significant transportation issues. And rather than saying that's not possible, which was the attitude I found, now we're creating that attitude that says, well, let's talk about how we can make it possible and how we can work through the barriers that do exist.
Let me tell you, one thing these three people did, was in economic development. And I realized this as mayor. When I was mayor of Charlotte, right on the South Carolina border, I noticed that Rock Hill, South Carolina — who are my friends from South Carolina in the room? You guys are amazing. You really are. You guys built a 20-lane highway into Charlotte. And I realized it wasn't just coming into Charlotte, but it was also exited Charlotte, where you were using the economic development region to recruit businesses, South Carolina, using Charlotte as your central base. And it was brilliant. In other words, you said, the heck with the South Carolina border, we're going to take advantage of this economic region. In fact, I think Rock Hill, South Carolina, when I was mayor, their economic brochure showed the Charlotte skyline and a jet taking off from the Charlotte airport, and it said, come to Rock Hill, South Carolina. So I started thinking about this when I was governor. I'm going, well, wait a minute. We got Elizabeth City right near Norfolk, and we've got Roanoke Rapids right near Norfolk, where the unemployment's pretty high. We're not winning. And these two come to me and go, Governor, the best way to rebuild Elizabeth City and Roanoke Rapids in that area in the Northeast, which is part of that, is it's closer to Washington, D.C. than we are to Asheville right now, to that area of the state. That's how big this state is we need to build our roads to connect to Norfolk, Virginia. How's that thinking out of the box? Where the governor of North Carolina now has to go, we're building roads not inward into North Carolina, but to connect with other regions of other states. And that can apply here to Tennessee, and that could apply down connecting Wilmington to Myrtle Beach, for example. And so we've got to get out of this concept of thinking in isolation based upon really artificial political boundaries that were made in the 1700s.
This idea of economic opportunity zones. And so we're kind of drawing circles around the economies of the state. One of those the governor mentions is Northeastern North Carolina, where unemployment has been the highest and the longest of any other part of North Carolina. And the answer to that economy, as he said, is really linking it to the Norfolk Port. It already is linked geographically to Morehead City, to Wilmington, but the opportunity there is to the northeast. And so we're looking very freshly at what it means to move people and product in and out of that port system and across North Carolina. So that's going to drive some of the planning in this 25-year transportation plan and in our 10-year economic development plan in terms of prioritizing where we put the transportation dollars. Also looking freshly at parts of this economy along specific clusters of growth. For example, aviation and defense. North Carolina is proudly the home of four of the largest military installations in the country, and we're proud of that, and we want to capitalize on that. We want those soldiers to be successful here. We want them to stay here for the rest of their lives. And so we want to grow the aviation and defense economies of not only North Carolina, but the Carolinas. Because, again, those airplanes know no state borders, right? And so the opportunity to grow that sector of our economy across the Carolinas is very significant. And we want to reframe how we think about that by thinking about a Carolinas region. So we're open, knowing that transportation boundaries that have been set, as you said, in the 1700s, really have little meaning today when it comes to how companies need to move people and product. I say it again, and that's the way we got to think about it, that what's the logistics advantage that North Carolina can offer, and we know there's some distinct advantages that can be
And I think that's all the state secretaries or commissioners in here know that we have a board meeting tomorrow where we're going to talk about having a regional planning committee, because we understand the importance of being able to understand that within North Carolina, in the Northeast, their media comes from Hampton Roads, Virginia. Their life revolves around being able to get up into that hub of economic activity. If you're in Cherokee County, you're looking at Chattanooga or Knoxville or Atlanta, and if you're toward the lower, where you're from, Sharon, you got Greenville, Spartanburg that you're thinking about. So or if you're in Brunswick County, perhaps you're looking at Myrtle Beach or up toward Wilmington. And so those opportunities are there, and we have unemployment in some of those areas that's higher than the rest of the state. And so as we plan, we overlay the by county unemployment numbers and the population numbers. Is it increasing or decreasing? Obviously, frequently you'll see higher unemployment leads to decreasing population. And so those are opportunities where we are looking at developing the projects for the 25-year infrastructure plan that the governor has asked for.
In fact, it's great to have the Federal Highway Administration people here and the leader of it. I think this is something that we can all work and to encourage the federal government, which I know they agree with this concept, is reward us for teamwork across political boundaries, whether it be county or city or even state. Because if we don't form these joint partnerships, there's not going to be enough money. If we keep thinking in isolation, we're not going to get the best bang for our buck. And Mayor Fox, my successor as Charlotte is now DOT Secretary, I know understands this concept. So I think one thing this group can do is come up with some ways in which we can encourage the federal government to reward teamwork, even as we provide partnerships. I need to work with Nikki Haley in South Carolina. One minute, she's my fiercest competitor, or Governor McDonald or Bill Haslam in Tennessee, but the next minute, they've got to be our partner. And I'm convinced with capital infrastructure projects, if we do joint sharing between the federal, state, local governments across political boundaries, you'll see more of that regional teamwork and deal with the geographic political limitations and turf limitations that we can't afford to have anymore. The money's not there anymore. And so we've got to think of ways to help you form these partnerships and say the heck with the turf or the heck with who gets credit.
And Governor, I know that teamwork has been a hallmark signature of your administration, but customer service has as well. And I think, John, you've really taken the lead within DENR on trying to inculcate a customer service culture. I know that we're doing that in commerce and in transportation as well. But if you'd like to talk about that.
Well, I think DENR has been considered for a long time, at least in North Carolina, sort of the obstacle of growth. And as I said previously, we have to treat people like they're not the enemy when they come to the front door. And it's interesting, Tony, that you say that, because there is something I want to make sure I leave everyone here with. And that is whether it's a project for commerce, or it's a project for transportation, or it's a project for corporate America. I've met with dozens of companies in the last 7 months. And it's interesting, not one is asking me to cheat or bend the rules. Not one. Not once has the issue of, can we bend the rules to get this permit? All people want is a helping hand. And instead of making people negotiate against themselves for 24 or 36 months to get their permit, why don't we just give them some assistance working through the guidelines and the maze without sacrificing our standards? And that's what we've done. And there has obviously been needed to be a cultural shift and an attitude shift at DENR. But people as a rule are positive. People are helpers. People want to feel good about accomplishing. And that's what my challenge is to the 4,000 employees at DENR, is to let's feel good about ourselves and getting this done timely, efficiently, and properly. And it's working.
Let me give you an example. These three, they're rock stars. I stay on the sideline and just let them go. And they're remarkable. I'm very lucky to have them. But in my third week in office, I had the chairman and CEO and founder of Ashley Furniture fly in to see me from Wisconsin. And he basically sat in my office and said, we made a deal with North Carolina to come here. We're about to renege. DENR is just a pain to deal with. We've had a permit held up for over a year. We're out of here. And it was due to some wetland situation right around their property, and I didn't know the technical aspects of it. I called this guy in. Within 30 days, it's handled. And now not only have they come, but we expect them to grow even more and create a lot of jobs. And it was just because we didn't cut through the bureaucracy. It was being held up down here by a very dedicated person who wasn't providing the customer service. And he came in and cut through the dialogue and realized they were talking past each other, not to each other. And that's customer service.
I can assure you that call from the governor's office 2 or 3 weeks into office was not a good one. I kind of knew what was going to come when I got there.
Tony, you know, one of the challenges that North Carolina faces, and each of you do too, is kind of the urbanization of America, right? It's a challenge because our children want to live in cities. They're not necessarily looking to live in rural parts of our states. And it's an issue that North Carolina is dealing with. Some of our highest points of unemployment are in our rural communities. And so I would just remind everybody here, what we're learning is that a big part of that resolve and a big part of that answer in our state has to do with transportation and logistics. And it really is a motivator for us as we think about how do we connect our rural communities with our urban centers, not just with roads, but with all types of transportation and logistics management. It will be a big piece of the answer to North Carolina's recovering economy, and it will be for you as well. But it's a different way for us to think about it. And I think of this as you talk about, I live in a small community south of Asheville that really is closer to Greenville, South Carolina, and Columbia than it is to North Carolina's capital and the closest urban centers in North Carolina. And as we think about that geography specifically, a rural community still at 12% unemployment, the answer to that really is the connectivity to Greenville-Spartanburg, more so than it is the connectivity to Charlotte or to Asheville, which are the two closest North Carolina communities. And so we got to think about that differently and help those communities. Maybe it's easier for us to think about it from the state to that community than it is for that community to think about it themselves. And so part of our challenge is helping the local folks begin to think differently about their connectivity. And I think about it specifically with a company that was recruited there. And the real key to getting that company recruited to that community was getting the transportation pieces better aligned for their success. And DOT has been an incredible partner in that process not only in the recruitment, but in the execution of that business plan for that company.
And Sharon, you know, they say follow the money. We're putting our money and our data against that very point there. The new strategic mobility formula that the governor signed into law, connectivity is one of the data points that goes into the 100% data-driven, needs-based project development plan that we have, reducing travel time, reducing congestion. Economic competitiveness is a part of that matrix, and safety, of course, is part of that as well. But connectivity, particularly connectivity to economic centers, ability to carry freight, and connectivity to military bases, that's all part of the data-driven process for evaluation of transportation projects, leaching the politics out of it, making it needs-based, and getting the money to where it needs to go. And Governor, I see you leaning forward here, but I think we wanted to take a few questions.
Yeah, we want to take questions from you again. I was the one who decided to do it this way, so I hope we haven't bored you. But one thing I realized, whenever I go through a state, including North Carolina, and I see the highways go like this, and then like this, and then like this, and the part that's widest is named after a politician, I know we probably didn't do it right. And so I'm trying to bring some assessment back to the road building system, not just where the most influence is, whether it be Republican, Democrat, I don't care, but this is a lesson learned. I know this doesn't happen in your states, but we've got a few highway systems that go like this, and it doesn't necessarily correspond to things like safety, congestion, economic development, and other factors. But with that, we'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have in the audience.
Governor, excellent discussion, all four of you, and I think that's just the kind of discussion, the kind of attitude that we want to hear. With the National Governors Association, are you hearing this kind of dialogue around the country in terms of the tie between transportation systems and economic development? Is it a topic of discussion nationally within the Governors Association?
Absolutely. In fact, they had a meeting in Milwaukee just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I think Secretary Fox came there. I had to leave right before he came. Please give him my best. But listen, the number one issue in America is jobs right now, and there's no doubt you hear from the administration, we've heard from previous administrations, that infrastructure is part of the revival of our country. I mean, you go back to Eisenhower and look at what he did, and we're still feeling the long-term impact of that. He's a hero of mine, not just as an Allied Supreme Commander, but frankly as a person who tied infrastructure, tying in the rural and urban areas together, and the East and the West and the Midwest together. And we feel the benefit, my generation feels the benefit of that today, and so does my nieces and nephews and everyone else. So I think it's a major issue. I think it's bipartisan. But we've got to start doing it on rationale, not based upon the politics. And we can't do it piecemeal either. One thing I learned as a mayor is you can't sell roads or other transportation if you don't show the public your plan. You can just say, hey, give me more money and trust us where we put it, but then they see the same thing happening again and they go, they're winners and losers in this. We've got to show a plan, and that's what I'm attempting to do in North Carolina, is show the plan as opposed to little piecemeal approaches all over the state or all over the country, which often some of those decisions are based upon so many different factors. And we need to think more as a team in that effort.
Next question. We have 1,100 people here. I'm sure there's one more question out there.
Or you could go out and spend money in my state right now.
I think we have one back here.
Governor, thank you for the discussion about the financial implications of things. And in Washington, I work for a national association that is fighting very diligently to try to bring funds to the transportation infrastructure arena. I'm curious how you and your colleagues in the Governors Association and others you touch base with are dealing with that situation, as we find it very difficult to bring the funds that you need to do the projects here in your state, to bring that federal capacity, to bring that larger picture to our national infrastructure. You mentioned Eisenhower. All of those things are phenomenal. It's the kind of message that we try to bring to the people, but for whatever reason, states are now having to go on their own and do a lot of those funding initiatives by themselves. And I'm just wondering, how do you and your friends in the Governor's Association and others bring that message to Washington? Are you bringing that message to Washington to say, look, we're working together as teams out here, we're building partnerships, we hope that you can join in that with us. I think that really is the key to success here to keep our national system in place.
I think there are attempts to do that, and I think there needs to be vast improvement. Just in my short tenure, I know both Republican and Democratic governors who are attempting to have that dialogue with both Congress and the administration. And I think what we need to do in working with the administration, working with Commerce, is develop that strategic plan. And also maybe develop more of a strategy and a process of how we do communicate it, as opposed to just a hit-and-run visit to Washington. It needs to be a strategy of communication, including many of you in that room, to go, okay, what's the next step? Because right now, there's no doubt in Washington, it's paralyzed. And we've got major transportation funding just paralyzed due to all these other factors. And what I offer to the administration in a bipartisan way is the effort to, yes, let's see if we can use the governors and mayors and others to break through this paralysis. And again, I'm not throwing rocks at anyone. It's a natural human dynamic that I've seen occur even with my own state, where we've got to start communicating with each other and thinking beyond 1 year. We've got to think 10, 20, 50 years down the road. And so I even offer that to the highway administrator to say, use us, and I'd be glad to help in a bipartisan effort. We've got to get off this, we're just paralyzed, and no one's going to win with that.
Could I add a corollary to that? I've always found it hard to ask for money when you're not running your organization efficiently. And one of the dictates from our governor is government efficiency. And it's always easier to ask somebody for money when you can look them in the eye and say, we're doing the best job efficiently, and we're not just spending money to spend money. Just because it's always been that way doesn't mean that's the way it has to be. And we're working very hard internally to make sure that we can maximize the efficiency of our
I think
operation.
there's a trust factor. We've got to break through the trust factor with the public that if we do get more money or ask for more money, we better verify that we're going to spend it the right way. And not show waste and inefficiency or corruption or play politics with it. And I think that's a challenge for all of us across political aisles. I think you had a question, man.
So,
We got a microphone coming up right here. This will be the last question.
I would be interested to know what you guys are doing to change the culture in your agencies. You've brought what sounds like a pretty fresh approach, and that might be uncomfortable for some folks who are career employees. And what are y'all doing to make that happen so they believe you, for one thing, okay? And another thing, what happened to the guy who was holding up the permit down here?
Well,
That's a great question.
It is a great question, and I think there's a leadership component to all of our jobs, and I know within DOT, we have 14 divisions. I've been in all 14 of the divisions. I've talked to employees just about everywhere I've gone. I've talked to many hundreds, thousands of the employees within the greater capital area. And what I tell them is, we're public servants. And let's take a step back and ask ourselves why we're doing this job and for whom we're doing it. And sometimes that's really all it takes. And when they see the leadership, where John Skvarla rolling up his sleeves and getting in there and working with DOT members to figure out where the problem is, and Terry Gibson equally rolling his sleeves up, they see that leadership and it emanates downward, and they all then roll their sleeves up. So a lot of it, for me, I believe, is leadership by example and communicating the expectation, because we have thousands of, 12,500 great employees in DOT, and they're doing a fabulous job working through weekends during emergencies and that kind of thing. and then rewarding them for that and thanking them for that as well. John, Sharon?
So,
And nothing happened to that person or persons down there because they were simply doing what DENR had always done. And what I needed to do is show them we've just got a different way of doing it. And people gravitate to that. Like I said before, people are positive. People want to be helpful. And we can make this better. We don't have to have Black Fridays and kill people. We need to, you know, we need to show them that there's a fun way to do this and make it exhilarating. And if we can run it more efficiently, guess what? We can pay people more money too.
I think it is about leadership, and each of us are doing something that I think was not, at least as my understanding, wasn't done very well before, and that was listening. I think I entered into a culture where we're really good at giving our 5-minute speech to that person with no conversation about, well, what do you think about that? Can you make this better? What are your thoughts about it? And so we kind of moved from 15-minute segment to 15-minute segment. And so one of the things that I've done is to say, we don't do that anymore. That's not how we schedule things. We want conversation about the issues that we're dealing with. It's easy. In 15 minutes, you can figure out how not to do something. Sometimes it takes a little more conversation to figure out how to do something. And so really trying to break through that paradigm of talking at people. Instead, let's talk with people, because the answers to so many of these solutions are with that guy that was down here that was holding up the permit. But they have learned how to do what they've been told to do, but they've been all these years sitting there saying, I don't know why we do it this way. Many of you are doing the same thing. And so we're trying to create a culture where those of you who have worked so hard to understand how government works and how it ought to work maybe, have the opportunity to engage in the conversation about how to make it better. So we're breaking down the silos and opening up the conversation and the dialogue.
First thing these three and my other 6 or 7 cabinet members did was they also asked the governor to come speak to the employees, but not just speak to them, but we actually do forums like this where we take their questions. And several of you have told me that's the first time the governor has actually gone out and spoken to the employees, and not just spoken to them, but I love forums like this. This is why I'm doing this, where we can. And I've learned a lot in those forums about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'll mention one other thing as we close, is we're really encouraging teamwork and customer service, and we just passed legislation 2 weeks ago where we're actually going to start a performance management system in state government, where we're actually going to help evaluate who's doing what we want regarding customer service, regarding quality, regarding the issues that are in the culture that we want. And we really haven't even had a performance management system within our state government with employees. And that is something that we're going to be doing. And one result of that is so we can reward the best with more money and also deal with those that maybe aren't fitting into that culture that we need for the future. So again, Secretary, thank you very much for your leadership of this organization. We welcome you to North Carolina. It's an honor to have our federal partners here. And I'll conclude again by saying, come back to the state at any time and open your wallets. And we look forward to being teammates
Governor,
with you.
if I could thank, on behalf of my 12 peers here in SASHTO, thank you, John, Sharon, thank you for taking time out of incredibly busy schedules for being here. Let's give them all a round of applause.
Thank you all very much.